Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pam Delfos, and on behalf of the National Foreign Language Center, I would like to welcome you to today's StarTalk Proposal Reviewer webinar. Thank you so much for the time that you're taking today and for the time that you'll be dedicating to thoughtful reviews of StarTalk proposals this year. We really appreciate your professional support of this very important process. I see that we still have a few individuals joining us, so I'll pause just a moment before we continue on. Not everyone was able to honor the time that we scheduled for today's webinar. So for those colleagues who were unable to join us today, I am recording the session and will send it out via email to those who were unable to attend. I'm also happy to send it out to each of you who is in attendance if you wish as a frame of reference. The slides that I'm sharing today are attached to the webinar. If you'd like to have them for review, I will be projecting them as I am now on the screen, but they will be there beyond the webinar for your use as well. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. We've scheduled an hour for our time together today, so our information is going to be very focused and to maximize the use of that time. You are invited to pose questions during the webinar if you think something is time sensitive to address at that point in time. Otherwise, I will also allocate time at the end of the webinar for questions as well. There are two ways you can ask a question, either by raising your hand on the control panel. And if I see a hand raised, I'll unmute your microphone so that you can share your question out loud. Otherwise, you can type your question within the control panel as well, and I'll address typed questions to the group so everyone can benefit from the questions and answer. If you do have questions that are unanswered through our time together today, please feel free, as always, to send follow-up questions or inquiries to StarTalk at the email address referenced on this slide. Our webinar today is scheduled to target three goals. First, in an effort toward improved inter-rater reliability, we're going to review key elements of the proposal and core resources that are used by programs to support instructional design within both our teacher and student programs. We're going to stress how important it is to rate proposal items based on defined criteria. Every item will be accompanied by rating criteria questions, and will address how to use those ratings to determine your final recommendation on an individual proposal as well. The second goal for our time together today is in the spirit of continuous improvement. We intend this year to provide feedback to each and every one of our proposal applicants. Proposals that do receive a grant award will benefit from that feedback as they start to plan for successful program implementation. And programs that don't receive an award this year will look to us for constructive feedback to inform their future program proposal development. And we really need to reach out to each of you to help us in providing programs with clear, actionable feedback that's aligned with our StarTalk priorities and practices. The third goal for our time together today is kind of acknowledging the fact that we've now celebrated a decade of trying to make a difference through our work with StarTalk. And every teacher and student participant in our programs is impacted by the quality of the teaching and learning experience within any given program. Because of that, each proposal is rated by 3 external reviewers, and attention to kind of consistency with our practices and priorities with the review process will help us, hopefully, in awarding funding to programs that really, through their proposal, evidence the greatest capacity for success. So we thank you for your commitment to helping us address these 3 goals as a reviewer this year. As most of you are aware, STARTALK is funded by the National Security Agency and administered by the National Foreign Language Center at the University of Maryland, College Park. And STARTALK is designed to address these 3 goal areas on this slide to increase the number of effective language teachers of our STARTALK languages, to increase access to language learning by more learners, and to develop effective curricula for STARTALK language teaching and learning. As you approach your work as a STARTALK reviewer, it's sometimes helpful to just have this big picture vision in mind. And as you review the proposal, ask yourself if the program is making meaningful contributions to this work. Every STARTALK funded program is required to plan and implement learning environments grounded in 6 research-based principles for effective language teaching and learning. As a STARTALK proposal reviewer, you will be looking for evidence of alignment with these principles. How STARTALK defines each of these principles is described and often with concrete examples on the STARTALK website. We find that sometimes review of this information from time to time is helpful, especially for those of us who are reviewing and making decisions on proposals and grant awards. This year, as I referenced earlier, and most of you are already aware, we're celebrating 10 years of awarding grants in support of less commonly taught language teaching and learning. Proposals target 1 or more of the 11 STARTALK languages with grant awards up to $90,000 for independent programs and approximately $112,000 for combination teacher and student programs. We do experience a high degree of program continuation. This past year, only 23 new programs were funded out of a total of 143 awards. Recently, we have experienced growth in the number of programs that provide opportunities that leverage technology through either blended or online programming. And we will be asking you, and you'll see there are questions in the proposal review process that invite you to assess the degree to which those online experiences are truly designed to support program learning targets. That's an important part of our review process this year. We also hope that programs benefit from access to the many professional development and curriculum development resources that are now available through STARTALK. And as a reviewer, you'll be looking for the use of these and other high-quality professional resources in alignment with identified program goals. STARTALK supports a cycle of professional practice with which most of you are already familiar, that starts from the point of proposal and extends through the final report, that's focused and aligned for learning within all of our programs. This is our common framework used to set goals, plan for learning, facilitate and check for learning, and make time to reflect, assess our progress, and adjust our practice as we plan for the future. At the point of proposal, programs identify their theme, learning goals, and how they plan to assess learning, in addition to examples of how they're going to prepare participants for success within their program. The proposal stage is a critical part of the STARTALK program experience and success, because if awarded a grant, the plans that are outlined within the proposal become the foundation for the program's curriculum. And they're also used to assess their success with program implementation at the point of the site visit. Because of this kind of through line of alignment, your proposal feedback to programs is very significant. The STARTALK proposal, as well as our common curriculum and learning plan templates, are all organized by backward design principles for learning. As you review your program proposals, we ask you to keep these guiding questions in mind and really help us to look for evidence of the program's attention to learning through really clear learner-centered goals, through identified performance of learning, and aligned experiences that are designed to prepare the learners for success. You'll see this alignment throughout the proposal and also within the curricula if you work within STARTALK programs this summer. Stages 1, 2, and 3, identifying those desired results, looking for what will be accepted as evidence of learning and having attained those goals, and then what experiences are going to be prepared for students and teacher participant success. The content of the webinar today was also shared in a series of 8 webinars that we offered to prospective proposal applicants this year. Some of the details that we shared were the fact that our STARTALK programs are asked to target learning goals and practices aligned with these core resources: the ACTFL World Readiness Standards for Learning Languages, the Necessful ACTFL Can-Do statements, and the Teacher Effectiveness for Language Learning, or TEL project framework. All of these core resources are critical to the design and also to the review of a strong STARTALK grant proposal. As reviewers, it's our job to look for meaningful learning goals, evidence of learning, and that continuum of planned learning that leads to success within each of the proposals. As you examine what programs plan for participants as learning goals, we remind you that we've asked each of the programs to start with the end in mind and describe those learning goals in terms of either the TEL project framework for teacher programs or the World Readiness Standards for Learning Languages for student programs. These goals need to be aligned with the background of their target participants and also reflect the STARTALK-Endorsed Principles. As a reviewer, we'll also ask you to please look for alignment between what the program identifies as evidence of learning and the program learning goals described earlier within the proposal. Consideration should be given to whether these performances of learning are meaningful, transferable, and also realistic given what they've told us about their target participants and the time that they're making available for learning. Both teacher and student programs are also asked to provide representative samples of learning experiences that will move participants toward that successful demonstration of program learning goals. Criteria and guiding questions used to rate this content varies throughout the proposal, and we'll ask you to look for connections to performance goals, learner-centered practices, and experiences that allow participants to independently engage in standard-based practice. So what are we looking for big picture within the STARTALK program proposals? Proposals that are awarded funding through STARTALK typically evidence these characteristics reflected here. As you go through the proposal review process, it might be helpful to keep this list in mind. Guiding questions, as I said earlier, 4 rating elements of the proposal are provided, and you experience those within the proposal review activity that you just completed. The questions will target things such as whether the program addresses and reflects the world readiness standards for learning languages, if the identified learning goals are proficiency-based, and if they're appropriate to their target learner population. Questions will also invite you to consider whether the learning targets can be realized through the target language within a student program and within the hours of instruction they've proposed. They'll ask you to think about whether the program is leveraging partnerships for budget management, publicity, advocacy, and sustainability. Questions will also invite you to think about the focus and whether it's truly on learning and evidence of that learning through performance. Questions will also ask you if they've demonstrated the ability of their staff to deliver the program as written and with their target population. One of the elements of the proposal this year is asking programs to identify key roles and responsibilities of each of their staff members, and then in relationship to those identified roles to provide background knowledge, expertise, qualifications that demonstrate the capacity of that individual to fulfill those responsibilities. And then programs are asked to think about how their program as planned contributes to building local capacity for sustainability into the future. One of the final elements that you'll be asked to consider is whether the program is being responsive to the feedback it's received from past STARTALK program site visit teams and program implementation experiences. There are, as you observed within the review activity, there's a section within the proposal that references the recommendations made by the site visit team and invites the program to share their response to those recommendations. So how does this work as a reviewer? Each of you, thank you, has completed an online, or hopefully you've completed your online proposal review exercise, and you'll be receiving a report that provides you kind of a window into how your individual review compared with the review of others. This activity is designed to help support our movement toward greater inter-rater reliability. I, along with members of the editorial board, also completed the same process, and we worked together to come to consensus around the STARTALK program responses that will be shared with each of you. The data, as you will see, reveals that this work is not an exact science, but hopefully all of us engaging in this exercise and having time together today and following a similar protocol as we approach the review process this year will help us come closer to a shared understanding of the STARTALK priorities and look-fors within the proposal review process. Each of the items within the proposal is accompanied by rating criteria questions, formerly referred to as hints, and I believe they're still referred to as hints within the applicant guides that you may have referenced when you did your reviews. Please use those questions when determining your rating for each item. In addition to having access to the proposal and site visit reports from any returning programs, you will also have access to the proposal as a whole within the review system. And for each item, you'll be asked to identify whether Based on the rating questions, rating criteria questions, you're going to determine whether a response is clearly evident, evident, weakly evident, or not evident. At the end of your proposal review process, you'll be invited to make your final recommendation. It's important to note that we've made a change in those recommendations this year. We no longer have a recommendation of highly recommended. We've eliminated that to try to improve our inter-rater reliability. So a program this year will either be recommended, recommended with support, or not recommended. There are clear guidelines within the review process system itself. If most of your ratings have been clearly evident or evident for the items within the proposal, you're asked to make a recommendation for funding. If most of your ratings have been evident and weakly evident, you're guided toward recommended with support as a final recommendation. And if the majority of your ratings were identified as weakly or not evident, then you're asked to rate a proposal as not recommended. With that said, we realize that not all responses are created equal, or not all items are created equal. So there is a degree to which professional discretion plays a role in this process. But overall, please follow those guidelines as written. And remember that this year, because we're down to 3 final options for your recommendation, a recommended with support rating has much higher stakes than it has had in the past. When making your final proposal rating, this slide just recaptures what I said earlier, and it's reiterated within the proposal review system itself. We will have the potential this year to fund a program with stipulations. That was true last year as well. So in review of the comments that you offer through the proposal review process, if it seems that overall a proposal and a proposed program is worthy of funding, but there's 1 or 2 areas that need to be adjusted in order for that funding to be made available to them, we will consider a funding with stipulation category if warranted. Online system tips. Our webinar today was actually very timely. I met with our STARTALK technical team today to walk through and do an initial test of the proposal review system. And I wanted to be sure to share this information with you. Within the system, you're going to have access to each item that's to be rated, along with the applicant's response to that item that's taken from the proposal, and the rating questions, the criteria questions that are designed to guide your rating. You're also going to be able to view the proposal as submitted as a whole and the most recent site visit report if there's a returning program. We ask that you please consider reading the proposal and site visit feedback from start to finish prior to conducting your review of individual items. For most items, the rating options and comment box are side by side and are very user-friendly. But when there are items with much longer responses, you may need to scroll through numerous pieces of information prior to rating or commenting on an item. So again, please read all the content first within an individual section or item before rating and commenting on that item. The programming team has managed an extensive amount of content and logistics to make the online system as user-friendly as possible this year. If you were a reviewer last year, you'll know that there were some glitches in asking you to actually rate each of the individual guiding questions. That's been fixed this year. But if you run into any content that seems out of place within the review system, please refer back to the proposal just to confirm that the right information was auto-populated or pulled. We're trying to do checks of as many representative samples as possible, but you have access to the original content. And if there's a red flag that comes up because the content seems to be from out in left field, just please double check. Trust, but confirm. And then finally, just a reminder that we really would appreciate and programs will benefit from the degree to which your comments are clear and focused and actionable. Your comments throughout the review process, and especially those that you include in your final recommendation, are really important, and as I shared earlier, are going to be communicated to programs for the purpose of continuous improvement. The proposal requires information on planning related to both instructional and program management, instructional design and implementation, and program management and logistics. Within the instructional section, applicants are asked to describe kind of an overview of their program, how they're going to measure learning, how learning will be facilitated, how the day will be structured, and how staff will be prepared through professional development to implement their program. The proposal overview, theme, and goals should be reviewed for alignment, as we shared earlier, with the core TEL and ACTFL resources and STARTALK principles. And we ask you as a reviewer to consider if the theme and planned experiences are authentic and relevant, and if they address the 5 World Readiness Standards, and the degree to which they facilitate culture and content learning in the target language. We ask that you also look for how the program plans to connect either the local or target language community, and the degree to which the program learning targets are clear and realistic. All of this is embedded within the overview, theme, and learning goals section of the proposal. In stage 2 of the proposal, programs are asked to plan for how learning will be assessed. If approved, if a proposal and program receives a grant award, these performance goals become the foundation for their program's curriculum. And we've already highlighted how programs are asked to start with the end in mind for this process, but we'll ask you as reviewers to look for the degree to which the program as proposed is clearly identifying what participants can do, whether those performance levels are appropriate to the group of learners with whom they plan to work, whether it's possible to realize those goals within the timeline they've provided, whether there's a plan in place for participants to have access to ongoing feedback in preparation for their final performance assessments, and whether performance tasks that they've planned are real life in nature that allow the participants to carry what they've acquired or learned in the program to life outside of the classroom. We ask you to also look and kind of cross-check to see if the program experiences, the learning experiences that they share, are in service to this learning and to these goals. The practice review exercise that you've contributed to online probably revealed to you that it's sometimes necessary to bounce around and review sections more than once as you work your way through the proposal. And we invite you to do that before determining your final rating and hitting submit. STARTALK programs are required to plan learning experiences that are standards and proficiency based. And as a reviewer, we ask you to please pay attention to the program's target audience and the plan to meet their needs for differentiation within a program. That includes looking for any plans for heritage language learners or returning students. And programs are encouraged to describe how their learning experiences reflect the STARTALK principles and lead to application for students and for teachers in the 3 modes of communication. Teacher programs are asked to provide a healthy balance of theory and applied practice with hands-on opportunities to micro-teach and to also provide an explanation of how they plan to offer rich and ongoing feedback and coaching to the participants. You'll also be asked to look for instructional resources that are in alignment with the program's learning goals and that are also linguistically and culturally authentic. As far as the daily schedule goes within program proposals, it's important to just remember that programs are asked to describe how they're going to integrate culture, content, and language by really maximizing time on task with language learning in culturally authentic ways and with content-rich themes and tasks. Please review the schedule information to assess how those planned learning experiences support their program goals, and also thinking about the participants and if the schedule seems appropriate for their developmental age or learning styles. If a program has identified guest speakers or online connections with target language speaking audiences, please look for alignment with those learning activities and the program learning goals. Professional learning for staff and plans for pre-program professional learning and ongoing professional learning and feedback are critical to a successful proposal. As a reviewer, we ask you to really look for how the program is preparing staff to teach for learning as described within their proposal. We're going to transition now from a focus on instructional components of the proposal to program management elements. Every effective program benefits and requires effective leadership and management for their learning plan to be successfully implemented. So we're going to make that shift now to elements of the proposal related to management and facilitation of the logistics of a STARTALK program. These include information on participants, staffing, planning for sustainability and partnerships, budget related elements, and kind of a working summary or descriptor of their program. Programs are asked to describe their target participant population and their plans for marketing in order to reach their target enrollment goals. We realize that this is challenging in advance of knowing a grant award, but programs are really asked to do this so we can get a sense of who their target audience is, what experiences and needs they might present, and how the program will plan to differentiate the experience to meet that target population's needs. We ask you to look at their plans for recruitment and with a special eye on how the program is providing equity in access to their program. It's important to consider how well the instructional program aligns with the developmental goals and needs of this target audience. Just as was true with looking at the instructional components of the proposal itself, we ask you to look for that alignment and the absence of a real disconnect between the program as planned and the audience for whom it is being planned. Staff experience. I referenced this earlier, but the program and instructional experience really makes a difference. Programs are asked to name and list all of the relevant experience of their key personnel that they plan to employ within their program. That includes, as I referenced earlier, their roles and responsibilities and related experiences that they have already had that prepare them to fulfill those responsibilities with the compatible learner population. STARTALK programs are required, as you know, to develop comprehensive curricula and learning plans. So as reviewers, please look for evidence of staff capacity and readiness to deliver teaching and learning environments aligned with STARTALK priorities and to plan effective curricula and learning plans with their target audience in mind. STARTALK proposal reviewers are also asked to consider how the proposal supports our ongoing mission and progress toward advanced language proficiency for students and licensing or continuing education for teachers. Programs are asked to kind of plan and think forward and share their strategies or plans to support that pathway for continued learning and program development well into the future. So please help us by examining the proposal for evidence of those partnerships for advocacy, leadership, and support for less commonly taught language learning within their local context. And look for clear evidence of steps that the program plans to take or has already taken towards STARTALK language program and teacher development within their local contexts. The budget. Budgets matter. STARTALK has detailed guidelines on the program budget development process on the administrative resource page of their website, and I've linked that on this slide. The questions on this slide will be used to guide your review of the proposed budget for each program, and you will, as you experienced with your review activity online through SurveyMonkey, you'll have within our system access to the program's budget to review. And we ask you to just really use these questions to help us and help programs maximize the value of every dollar that's spent in service to learning. The big picture questions are whether things they've budgeted are allowable, whether items in the budget align with the proposal. One of the things I've shared with potential applicants in our previous webinars was that if there's something mentioned in the proposal that seems to have monetary, budget-related components to it, make sure it's in the budget, and vice versa. If there's something in the budget, make sure you've spoken about that item and its value to learning within the proposal. It's kind of a crosswalk back between proposal and budget. We are also carefully looking and examining whether all staff positions are reflected in the budget, as well as the reflection of all instructional materials and special services, guest presenters, etc. And then as a reviewer, we ask you to kind of step back, big picture, and think if are there any items in the budget that warrant greater explanation or supporting resources, and calling that to our attention, please, within the review process. Bottom line, related to budgets, we're looking for transparency, budgets that are reasonable and customary and kind of competitive with peer proposals, that don't duplicate costs, and that really, as I said earlier, maximize the benefit of every dollar awarded. Programs are also asked to provide summary statements. This is probably the toughest part of the whole proposal. We ask programs to make sure their summaries are clear and that they assume no prior background knowledge by the reader. These descriptions are sent to NSA and used on the STARTALK website to describe the program if funded. So we ask programs to include in that summary statement an overall description of program design, goals, who the participants are, and how everything's going to work. Combination programs. Combination programs are combination programs. They receive an additional $22,500 of funding, and they're given to programs who are trying to leverage the benefits of hosting a teacher and companion student program, or hosting a student program and a companion teacher program. And we'll ask you as reviewers to please look at combination program experiences and assess the degree to which the mutual benefit of teacher program to student program and vice versa is clearly evidenced. These are the two questions that can kind of support your review of combination program proposals. It's just getting at that mutual benefit and reciprocity between the teacher and student program, and based on real evidence within their proposal of that existence. Residential programs are some of our favorite programs to visit. They're really powerful, and they're also very expensive and have a high degree of program management and supervision and coordination involved. So proposals for residential programs should very clearly state the need for that residential component and how elements unique to being a residential program will be supported, managed, and supervised. Looking for, within your review of any residential program, for cost savings, for liability management, supervision throughout the 24/7 schedule, and whether the outcomes of the residential program are clearly in alignment as designed with their program goals is critical. As I said early in our discussion today, we have a high percentage of returning and long-term legacy programs within STARTALK. The majority of our awards do go to those returning programs at this point in time, although we have engaged in significant outreach beyond the STARTALK community this year. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the results of that outreach might be in terms of new proposals that might come into us this fall. We are going to continue to look for evidence of responsiveness to feedback and attention to continuous improvement within our continuing programs. And these are some of the kind of look-fors when reviewing our STARTALK program proposals from returning our legacy programs. One of the most critical things is that response to the site visit recommendations, that you'll be asked to read both the site visit recommendation for either management and logistics or instructional planning and implementation, and the program's planned response. This is just a reminder of the final proposal rating options: recommended, recommended with support, and not recommended. And remembering that we will be using your targeted feedback in framing letters to each of the program applicants this year. Planning forward. I started the webinar this afternoon kind of with a reminder about the critical role that the proposal plays in the program implementation and evaluation process. Remembering that the content from the proposal is used in the curriculum template, site visit report, and even within the program's final report. It serves as a compass for the site visit to determine if the program in practice reflects the program as approved at the time of proposal, whether it reflects the content that you're recommending. So as you review and provide feedback on each of the proposals assigned to you this year, please think about these connections and the degree to which the program within its proposal has outlined goals that are realistic, meaningful, and measurable. And we just ask for your cooperation in limiting your feedback to those real high leverage areas for growth aligned with our STARTALK program priorities and principles. A quick slide on logistics before we open things up to questions. The online application closes on November 4th at 7 p.m. local time, wherever the applicant is in the world, 7 p.m. wherever their IP address on their computer is on November 4th, the online application window will close. Each proposal is triple blind reviewed, so your review along with 2 other reviews will result in a compilation score that is then reviewed and forwarded to NSA for final decision making. And programs will receive status of their application by February. And all of the programs that submit a proposal this year are scheduled to receive feedback from STARTALK by April. At the same time, we hope the grant awards will be released in late April, although we have received information from NSA that it might be possible this year to get those grant awards released even earlier. So we're hopeful that that's going to be true because it will significantly empower programs to start their recruitment and their curriculum, staff hiring and curriculum design process earlier. Just a friendly reminder to keep those STARTALK principles in mind and visit the STARTALK website if you have questions or want to review any of the resources or content that we discussed today. So we do have almost 15 minutes left for discussion and questions. I see that there are a couple of questions that have been posted, so I'm just going to start by looking at those. And I have a question that's, does the new calibration of the final recommendations make recommend with support more of a neutral judgment than before? That's an interesting question / interpretation. Our assessment is that historically, I'll just share, historically, most of the programs that were rated highly recommended or recommended were funded. And then we would go into the recommended with support proposals and review them with a more critical eye. This year, because there are only 3 rather than 4, and because of the fact that recommended means clearly a majority of ratings were either clearly evident or evident, we believe that the recommended is going to be more heavily weighted, obviously, and recommended support takes a program into that category that they may or may not make the finish line. That said, those final recommendations really need to be based on the cumulative data of your ratings for each of the individual items, and each individual item needs to be rated grounded in use of the rating criteria questions. So it's important that you review each one of those questions prior to rating each item. I hope that answers your question. Another question, sometimes it's not possible to complete reviewing a proposal in one session. Does the system allow saving and resuming the review later? I will check in with our development team. It really needs to support that process. So I will make sure that we follow up. If it does not allow you to step away and come back, we'll make sure that before you receive access to the system and proposals to review, that we inform you of the fact that you need to complete a review before stepping away. But my hope is that that will not be necessary. Budget question. Payroll budget is the highest component of overall budget. What would you suggest as to what is a threshold that if passed, the budget warrants a red flag? Great question, to which there is no answer. It depends. STARTALK has been intentional about not providing ceilings or ranges, although they do have some sample budgets that they provide in the budget support resources to programs. Every program is so unique, and especially within our post-secondary institutions with faculty and benefits packages that come into play with their management of STARTALK programs. It's been really difficult to set limits or guidelines. This is something that we are giving consideration to, but at this point in time, there are no ceilings. But if you see something that seems to be really out of line with the other proposals you're reviewing, it's something that you can put in response in that comments box in response to that. Are there any budget items that may require more additional information? That would be something we do reach out to programs and ask them for clarification in instances like that. I see a couple of raised hands. I'm just going to check in. Hi, Nancy, this is Pam. Did you have a question?
No, I think I must have checked that by mistake. Sorry.
Okay, that's all right. I'm sorry I didn't get to you earlier. Mohammed, did you have a question in addition to the one you sent by text? Doesn't appear so. There's a follow-up question to the previous budget question. Would cost per student be a good metric? We do sometimes look at cost per student when it appears that total program amount is considerably high for, especially if a program is identifying a noticeably low number of participants. We do kind of look at that breakdown. So, and we have discussed whether that would be something to build into the system is the overall cost per participant. At this point in time, it's not factored within your review of the proposal, but if you observe something, again, please share that in the category of a budget item that invites questions and may be worthy of following up. How about the number of students targeted? Are there guidelines of when a program is cost effective? That's a great question. We do kind of have a guideline for student programs as far as ideal hours of instruction, at least 90 hours of instruction within the program, so that the participants that are present get the biggest bang for the buck as far as teaching and learning time. Again, time is not enough. It's the quality of that instructional experience that really matters. But again, we don't have specific numbers. It really is looking at the number, the teacher and student ratio for effective learning based on the learning experiences that they've planned and the learning goals they've outlined within the hours of instruction available within their program. So if they only have one teacher, they can't have more students than would be manageable for effective learning with that one teacher. In some of our more rural locations, access to highly qualified instructors is a limiting feature. So there are all sorts of factors that weigh into that, but really thinking about the best ratio for a high quality teaching and learning experience and maximizing access to that learning to build program capacity over time and hopefully build interest in an academic year program is kind of what we're looking for there. So that may have been a long-winded answer to a very targeted question, but hopefully it was helpful. Other questions before we close? We have just a few minutes left. I'll just share a quick comment as the person that will be primarily responsible for drafting the feedback to each and every applicant for STARTALK programs this year. I really thank you in advance for attention to our criteria and providing feedback that can be very clearly summarized and communicated to the programs. I thank you all for your time. I apologize for the golden retrievers barking at the mailman in the background as we close. And please feel free to send any follow-up questions later today or into the future as you go through your reviews. Thank you and have a wonderful afternoon.